Boys and girls, ladies and gents, welcome to the channel. It is currently January, and for the start of the new year, I wanted to do a top 3 marches for 2024 that I would be looking out for. These are going to be taking into account what marches I'm going to look for, how would I invest in them, and what kind of gear I would look for on them. These are not going to be like intern piecemeal marches. These are going to be like late game, end game marches that I think are really good. The first one, hands down, I don't think anybody really has to question this in any capacity, is going to be Scipio LC. I think bar none, that is the strongest march right now. The march is absolutely, uncontestably disgusting. That march is everything you'd really be looking for, and you really don't have to overthink it. If you're going to invest in this march, first you'd want to get Scipio to 5551, then you'd want to get LC to 5511. His third skill isn't particularly great in my opinion. His fourth skill is okay, however just 5511 for 190 sculptures is really good. Afterwards you can expertise LC, and then you can expertise Scipio. Generally, I know a lot of people are avoiding expertising Scipio. However, his fourth skill is really good. I mean, I actually really like this, especially if this is like your first full endgame march. There's a lot of survivability right here. I don't think it's good enough to invest in this before you expertise LC, but I think it's worth considering afterwards before you go into your next march. If you are going to be using Scipio LC in the open field, I think it is imperative that you go for a 4-piece infantry set, a ring, and a horn. I wouldn't overthink it. There's nothing really else going on here. I know some people like the KVK helm and the KVK wep, but if infantry is going to be your first T5 and you're just coming out of pre-soc into soc, or, you know, whatever's going on, these are the easiest pieces of gear to generally get, and you don't want to contest your KVK pieces for anything else. You don't really want, like, set weapons for anything else, or really, like, set helms for anything else. So all of these can go straight into infantry, and you'll generally be fine. In the order that I would get it, I'd be looking for the Hope Cloak first, then I'd be looking for the set helm, then I'd be looking for the set gloves, then I'd be looking for a ring, then a horn, then the set boots, and finally the set weapon. The reason why we like the 4-piece set here is because the 10% march speed is actually really, really nice. I like these stats a lot. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to go for it. I think Eternal Night, you may have noticed me not saying anything, but I do have an Eternal Night. I don't think it's that good of a piece. I think generally you should just save your materials and just stick to a Kawarax ability. If you really find yourself in an abundance of materials, you might be able to consider it, but if you haven't finished your other marches, or if you still have any other blueprints that you're trying to build, I would just avoid it. You can just do Eternal Night later if you want to, but obviously at the end of the gear order, you would have an Eternal Night. In terms of, you know, what are the pros and cons of this? I don't really know any cons for this march. It's actually super, super strong. It's got good dueling stats. It's great in a murder ball. The Scipio's debuff is one of the strongest in the games. LC's debuff stacks up very well as well. It's got great stats. It's very fast, and it's got great damage. Get this march as fast as you possibly can. There's nothing really else to say about it. Next, we're looking at ZL Herman. This march is a little more complicated just because of the gear required and the different things you can look at it. ZL is a really strong commander. He's like a much better YSG, which is awesome because YSG is already pretty strong. Having him as a primary allows him to get off his abilities faster, which is why you wouldn't have Herman ZL, you have ZL Herman instead. If you were trying to invest in this pairing, Herman is actually my next expertise, and I'll be using ZL Herman as well. I believe you should get Herman to 5551, and then you can use him in the end turn before you get ZL. You could probably, just like Scipio, you can use him with probably YSG or Mehmed or maybe even Ethelfled or something like that. Again, that's just in the end turn. After that, as soon as you can, you get ZL to 5511. Then I would like to expertise ZL, and then you can come back and expertise Herman. Herman's expertise, I've heard good things about it. I've heard not necessarily bad things about it, but people thinking like it's less than worth it. I mean, I would have to see like more combat to determine if I didn't like it, but on paper, this looks really good. And from what I've seen of it, the limited field use, it also looks really good. So I wouldn't be too shy about going for the ZL Herman march in total. I would say the upsides of this march is that it's very, very strong. It's a much safer invest than number 3 on this list, which is going to be Nevsky Joan. And that's because the new Capcom that is going to be coming out in a few months, probably around 6, is going to be replacing probably either Nevsky or Joan. And one of them getting replaced means that the march isn't very future-proof. Whereas Scipio LC right now is the strongest march in the game. It will be the strongest for quite a while, I think. For ZL Herman, obviously Herman just came out, so this is going to be the strongest archer march for a very, very long time. There's a huge amount of damage that you can get out of this, especially if there are many Hermans on the field, many people applying poison, then, you know, many of the abilities popping out. It just looks like nothing but money. The move speed is also really nice on Herman, so, you know, it's a little faster than you'd normally be expecting, like a CL YSG, something like that. But you have to maneuver it safely. One of the biggest downsides of this march is ZL Herman is going to get the tar beaten out of it. If anybody sees this march on the field, best believe they're going to punch you in the head until you can't move. That's the first thing I would do. So I would do it. I'm sure many, many, many other people are going to be considering it. Another downside is if you're just transitioning with this, and this isn't just something you're getting in the very late end game, you're going to be looking at your wheel for KVK3 coming like after Kingsland, I believe. So if you're looking for this to be your first, it does doesn't make any sense because you're not going to see any kind of archer combat because you won't have the archer wheel in time. So you cannot transition into this KVK3, it'd have to be in KVK4. Another thing I would say is the best in slot KVK gear for this March is going to require 2 KVK pieces. That's kind of pricey. You know what I mean? Like if you're very late in the game and then you can make sure that you get like the KVK helm and KVK web for this, that is, by the way, contesting your cavalry KVK helms. Just depends how many coins you can get, because if you're like losing KVKs as well, it's going to be very difficult. So just food for thought before you go into this. It is a very strong March though. Ideal gear, as I see it, the cookie cutter is you're going to be looking for the 2-piece KVK set, a Milky Way, an Ian's Choice, leadership boots and pants, and a ring and a horn, right? And that's going to be your total set. It's called the 222, except you're not using set chest and set gloves. Now, if you have never pulled an Ian's Choice or a Milky Way out of the tavern, then perhaps set gloves and set chest seem a little better. However, most people have a Milky Way or Ian's Choice. Now, Ian's Choice isn't like high on the things you want to build. However, if you already have these blueprints, it's really hard to justify not picking it up, because as you go further, you're going to get a bunch of Ian's Choices and a bunch of Milky Ways for free. When it comes to refining, and especially iconic refining, hyper late game, you know, you really don't want to be spending like 30,000 aggregate gem value and building repeated set chests for archers and repeated set gloves for archers, when the set gloves are already being contested for infantry and the set chest is already going to be contested for cavalry, like those slots of pick ones. So just food for thought. If you can get the Milky Way and the Ian's Choices, it's a really, really good choice, I believe. And at max, it's going to be slightly stronger. There is an argument to be made for leadership gloves. There is like a group of people that would rather have these gloves than the Ian's Choice or the set gloves. And I actually really like this. I think I'm going to be going for this. So there's 2 reasons. So one, the leadership boots and pants will get you. So this is going to be 6% troop health, and this is going to be 8% troop health. So we're looking at 14% there. And then you're also going to be having an Ian's Choice, and that's going to bring you up to 14% health, 8% attack, with 3 base health, and then 3 attack. On the flip side of this, if you were to have a, we'll say an archer set chest instead of a Milky Way, like I do, there is an argument to be made for going for set archer boots, where you could go from attack, which is, you know, this one. So you go from attack to defense, which is pretty good. You'd still get the base health, which is pretty nice. Then you go for leadership pants, so you get the base health still and the troop health. You'd be swapping from health to defense, which isn't great, but it's okay. And then you'd be swapping from attack here with the Ian's Choice or the Dragon's Van Braces into defense. But there's more. The really cool thing about this is the iconic attribute for leadership here is different for some reason. I actually don't know why this is the case, but this goes from archer-based attack to troop-based defense. You'd be swapping a base attribute from attack to defense. If that's what you're looking for, it might be, it might not be. For me personally, I think swapping more off of attack might be something I'm looking for, since I already have the Dragon's Breath plate, and I'd rather be able to fit in like an endgame DB set. Another thing you can do is you can just run like 6 DB, and that's totally fine. Or again, you could just run the regular 222 instead of the new and experimental 222. Long story short, these are all really hyper late game, like super nuanced things. 6-piece DB versus regular 222 versus like new age 222. None of these are going to be like really far off base. So if you find yourself with a bunch of Dragon's Breath pieces and you just want to run 6-piece Dragon's Breath and not think too much and take all your Conquest coins and put them into like cavalry, that's fine. Really don't overthink of it. I just wanted to make sure that I could put in some extra food for thought for you guys. If I were to have a gear order and a basic one, I would say Milky Way first, then a ring, then a horn, then the KVK weapon, then the leadership boots, the leadership pants, the KVK helm, and finally the Ian's Choice. Hypothetically, if you were to go with what I was thinking of, the more new age potential meta, I don't know. Again, this is not like a bunch of like really tested stuff. This is just stuff that I've heard of. The set archer chest, a ring, a horn, then the KVK weapon, then the KVK helm, then the leadership gloves, then the leadership pants, and then the set boots. Or just go for the 6-piece Dragon Breath, where you just go like Dragon's Breath chest into like weapon into whatever you want to pick in whatever order, because the Dragon's Breath is all like just pretty good. As long as you have the set chest first, you're good to go. Comprehensively, Scipio LC, very, very strong. ZL Herman, also very strong, just less consistent than Scipio LC is going to be. The third March on this list is going to be Nevsky Joan. Nevsky Joan is a much more questionable invest right now, just because we don't know where it's going to go. We are in a position right now where Nevsky Joan could be phased out pretty soon. Not necessarily specifically Nevsky or specifically Joan. We really don't know what's going to be going on here. QB was our last release when it comes to cavalry, so logically we get an AoE cavalry commander this time. And our AoE might be somebody who either A, replaces Joan of Arc, or B, is someone very similar to Herman in terms of like buffing cavalry AoE. So it wouldn't necessarily replace Joan of Arc. It would replace Nevsky, but not as a debuff. It would pair up with Joan as a better damage steroid than QB, potentially, right? And then we'd be looking at like a Nevsky QB or a QB Nevsky with like Joan and the new commander. This is gonna be the third best March. However, it's still very strong. It just is less future-proof. But if you're gonna be running 2 cavalry pairings anyway, it really doesn't matter too much. So if you were to go for Nevsky Joan, you would start out with Nevsky at a 5-5-5-1. You could run like a YSG as a secondary and Mehmed as a secondary in the interim. Then you'd be going for a 5x15 Joan. The X here is just a variable. Whatever this goes to is fine. This is a very good skill. You're eventually going to want this to 5 anyway. Just make sure that this third skill is like 1 or 2 at best. So you want her last skill to be 5, her first skill to be 5, and the third skill to be 1 at most 2. After this, you're going to go back to Nevsky. You're going to expertise him. Then you're going to come back to Joan with whatever skill resets you have and try to get her either to A, 5-5-1-5, or B, you're just going to expertise her if you really don't have RNG like that. If you can get her to 5-5-2-5 or 5-5-1-5, those sculpture saves are really, really, really good to put literally anywhere else. Hyper late game, expertising her is fine. If I remember correctly, the math on this is about like a Ring of Doom worth of value, which Ring of Doom is really good. I just don't know if it's like 310 sculptures good. Keep that in mind when you're investing in her. If you get her to 5-5-1-5 or 5-5-2-5, that's basically as good as you really need. It is a really great debuff March. Again, Nevsky is going to be launching a 45% health debuff, which is actually unheard of. It's just such a crazy amount. It is a March that is really, really good as soon as you can possibly get it. It's your first wheel you're going to get. In KVK 3, you can run Nevsky with Mehmed, Nevsky with Mina. It's all great. Like a lot of versatility. Like cavalry are really, really good in terms of being able to pick your fights and being able to stick on targets and all that good stuff. One of the downsides is you're going to need 3 marches or at least be attacking with some friends if you're looking to make this defense reduction make sense, because if you only have 1 march, then it's only going to be 15% damage. So be aware of that whenever you're launching your ability out there. Best upsides, you're fast. You've got really good and simple gear. There's nothing like too cutting edge that you really have to think of. It's like really cut and paste how you're going to invest into the comms, how you're going to invest into the gear, and they're always going to be consistently good. It's got the first wheel, which is a really easy transition, and the comms that you can put in with cavalry comms are really nice. So like if you're starting with like a Nevsky Mina, and then you're going to like a QB Joan, and then it's going to be like Nevsky Joan with like QB Mehmed, and then, you know, the new commander like slots it. Like it's all pretty simple with how you're going to move your cavalry commanders around. They just do all like an assload of damage, and so it's not too difficult. The downsides is either Nevsky or Joan is probably going to be shot in the head pretty soon. We have no real idea which one it's going to be or like how it's going to be. And so the future proofing on this is not great. Doesn't mean that these marches are going to suck. It just means that they're going to be a little less good than they are now. It's not going to be as bad as like the difference between, let's say, Sargon and Tarek compared to like Gorgo and LC, right? Like Gorgo and LC is so much better than Sargon and Tarek. It's not going to be something like that. I don't believe so for the next gen of Cav, but again, something to think of. Nevsky is also getting older. So right now he's got a 45% defense debuff, and that's awesome, but eventually that's just not going to be as good as it was anymore. And the day where somebody else gets like a 40% or 45%, he's probably going to hit the bench. So that could be in 2 commander releases. It could be in 4 commander releases. We just don't know. Another really big issue is the other troop types are really, really, really strong. Scipio LC is bar none the strongest march in the game. Nevsky Joan was the strongest march for a while, but Nevsky Joan is pretty old at this point. So Scipio LC is the strongest. ZL Herman is probably going to be the second strongest. And Nevsky Joan, I don't even know if it's necessarily stronger than QB Joan. It just does more in a 5 or 7 march system. So it really helps your other marches as well. If you were looking to gear up a march like this, you would be looking to go for a pair of set boots, a KVK helm, a set chest, a ring, a horn, a Navarre's, a Sacred Dominion, and an Ash of the Dawn. Those are in order, actually. So the first thing you want is your set boots, then the KVK helm, then the set chest, a ring, a horn, the Navarre's, the Sacred Dominion, the Ash of the Dawn. Sacred Dominion or Ash of the Dawn can come in kind of whatever order. But just in general, as long as you have like the set boots, the KVK helm, and the rest purples, you really should be like, okay. Cavalry gear is really, really, really forgiving. And the transition from like good cavalry gear to great cavalry gear is also really forgiving. Nothing is really going to be as much of a pain in the ass as getting like 4-piece infantry gear, just because that getting to 4-piece imp set is just real tedious. In total, top 3 marches, Scipio LC comes first, ZL Herman comes second, Nevsky Joan comes third. I'd be looking at Scipio LC for a march that every single person should get. I'd be looking at ZL Herman as a march that also every single person should get, and I'd be looking at that Nevsky Joan is a march to be a little hesitant on into the future. These are going to be my top 3 marches of 2024. If you guys enjoy content like this, please be sure to drop a like, a comment, consider subscribing, all that good stuff. If you guys want to help donate to the stream to help support the channel, you guys can always go to the Streamlabs link in the description below and tip there. If you guys want private account coaching, I do private account coaching for $35 a session on stream and for $75 a session off stream. If you guys are interested in that type of thing, go to the Discord in the description below and make a ticket. That Discord is also the best place to go if you guys ever want notifications when we go live or any announcements to come on the stream. For example, when I do announcements for account roasting or something like that. Take it easy, everybody. I appreciate y'all showing up, and good luck.